Hi, my name is Gaming Goose, and what I really want to talk about today is a gaming franchise. This is one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time that just failed miserably. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through every single Turok game in the entire franchise, and we're just going to talk about Turok because I fucking love Turok. So I feel like I need to give some explanation to what Turok is. It is a game series that came out originally on the Nintendo 64 based on a comic book. This is actually one of the newer comic book series that came out. It's based on a comic book that was sort of around the 1950s about a Native American time traveler that sort of ends up in the Valley of the Lost, I think it's called, or the Lost Valley, and ends up fighting a load of dinosaurs. There are so many games in the series, and very recently, I think maybe last year, they announced a new sort of rebooted version coming out by Saber Interactive, who are the same people that make Space Marine. So I feel like it's going to be a very gory and very true to the game series. Now, the game series, what we're going to go through today is I'm going to go through every single one of the games in the Turok series. So that's starting with Turok on the Nintendo 64. And after that, we're just going to talk a little bit about the game, and I'm going to spread some sort of lore dump into this, some production, some just like general knowledge shit that I know about this series. So, like I said, starting off, we are going to talk about Turok. This came out on the Nintendo 64 in, I think, 1997. That's just off the top of my head. I'll double check that in a minute. So yeah, this game came out. This was one of my favorite games ever. I can't even remember how I got this, but I remember the first time I saw this. So a lot of my consoles were originally like hand-me-down consoles. So when my brother had the Nintendo 64, I had an SNES and so on and so on. And I remember like the first time I was absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid. Like Jurassic Park was one of my favorite films. It was just fantastic. And then I saw this game where there was a dinosaur running through this mist at the first person. And I thought it was like GoldenEye at the time. I don't know if I played it around the same time. And yeah, it just blew my mind. And I got really into the Turok games. Unfortunately, I didn't think I actually properly owned it. Like the first Turok, I didn't own it myself for quite a while. And it was I used to go to my cousin's house. He's still quite far away, but I was quite close with my cousins. I would just play Turok, and they were really good at the game. They'd unlocked all the levels and all the keys and stuff like that. So I would just go in there, and I used to just like randomly hunting the animals that is in the game that weren't the dinosaurs. But yeah,
The game industry in the 90s was a wild place full of innovation. For the first time, lots of games were going to 3D. And the Nintendo 64 was the new 64-bit machine on the market by Nintendo. That's a stupid written line that I'm not going to take out. But among all of the platformers and mascot games that came out around the time of the launch of the console, Turok really stood out as a fast, brutal, prehistoric first-person shooter, as I said, based on a comic book from the 50s. Turok Dinosaur Hunter was originally developed by Iguana Entertainment. The footage you're seeing is of the remaster just for aesthetic reasons mainly, and the playability captured via Switch. Honestly, the remasters are the best way to play the games. You go back to the original car Nintendo 64 and horrific to watch. And I will never forget the first time I played this game and saw that fucking dinosaur that I just killed there run at me through that mist. That is a core memory for me, because as a kid I didn't know that dinosaurs could be in video games and would be trying to hunt you down. Sounds really dumb, but I was a dumb kid. So as I previously mentioned, the game was developed by Iguana Entertainment, which were owned by Acclaim, and development for the game started around 1995, mid sort of 90s. While PC shooters like Doom and Quake had already defined the genre, the N64 had offered quite a unique challenge. Limited memory, being that everything was crammed onto cartridges, and the performance of the console was pretty inconsistent. Like, they had to bring out a different peripheral to increase the RAM. A lot of nostalgic people for the N64 forget how bad it actually was as a console. It's a miracle it was ever like as popular as it was. Now, one of the things you won't be able to see, because I'm playing the HD remaster of this, is when the game was originally released there was so much fog in the game, and the reason for that is it was to get around the hardware of the console, just to get like a better resolution and have spawning enemies, and to hide the draw distance of the game. It was a very clever workaround, but it does massively hinder bits of the game, especially in a sort of ranged FPS game. Now, eventually the game was released in Europe in March 1997, and players were dropped into this brutal world filled with velociraptors, cyborg mutants, and some weird alien monstrosities. There's even like some disgusting bug creatures that fight you like in a desert level. One of the big things for me is I really love the movement of the Turok games. They are so fast and acrobatic, and there's even sections which you're about to see right now which require a lot of acrobatics platforming. You're probably going to watch me do this quite a few times. If you can't tell, this is just some raw footage that I've edited over, well, I'm talking over even. But that speed and acrobatics that come in the game, I feel like really made it stand apart from other games on Nintendo 64 at the time. Each level in the game is very open-ended, and the platforming adds so much more verticality to the game. You can unlock so many secrets and surprises in this game. Watch me fuck this jump up in a minute. It's hilarious. Right at the end, can't believe it. Now, one of the greatest things about Turok is the music. The original music was, for the first game, composed by Darren Mitchell, who literally could be anyone, but that's what it says on Wikipedia. And I really think the music in this game helps define the tone of the game. It sort of blends this atmospheric tribal percussion, ambient sort of pitter-patter sounds, and sharp synth stabs to give that sort of 80s nostalgia, 90s nostalgia. And it's a bit weird that it's all to this like sci-fi prehistoric setting. Now, because at the time, like I said, released on Nintendo 64, it was a cartridge rather than a CD, so the music had to be heavily compressed and sequenced, relying on the Nintendo 64's onboard synthesizer. This resulted in the soundtrack feeling a little bit raw and tense, but I think it sounds amazing. Like, I think that adds so much to it. So the footage you're actually seeing now is when you fight the last boss in the game, the campaigner. The main reason I wanted to show this bit of the game, even if it is a little bit of a spoiler, is just because I wanted to show you this ridiculous death animation, which I thought was really funny, and the ridiculous revival animation. Man's spine is made out of fuck knows what. I always love it when you used to shout, "I am Turok." But I also really wanted just to show off all of the ridiculous weapons that you have in this game. I've said ridiculous too many times, but they're so fun. I think they're some of the best weapons in any game ever. Like, all of them, incredible. Now, this first game was such a big thing for me growing up. My brother picked up this game, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. I used to try and sneak into my brother's room just to play this game. game when he was out and about. But I'm actually fairly sure that he rented or borrowed his copy of the game, because the time that I actually really got into playing this game was when I went to my cousin's house and they had a copy of it. I would sit for hours and hours at my cousin's just playing the first couple of levels of Turok, because I was a bit of a dumb kid and not really understand how games worked. But at that time, because I was such a dinosaur obsessed kid and I only had a certain amount of sort of consoles that were mine, basically being an SNES and a Game Boy, my mum eventually got me a Game Boy game, and I want to talk about that next because it is part of the Turok series.
So when I said that I was going to do every single game in the Turok series, I literally mean every single game. So the next one we're going to be talking about is Turok Battle. I can never quite read what it's called. It's Battle of the Dinosaurs. This came out on the Game Boy back in the 90s, released around the same time as the original Turok game, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. So let's get into this one.
So, while the Nintendo 64 version of the game was breaking boundaries in 3D, Acclaim also wanted Turok to reach portable players. This is the game that my mum bought me. It's the original cartridge, and this is just raw footage that you're watching here. Development of the Game Boy title was handled by Bit Managers, which is like a Spanish studio known for squeezing impressive detail out of Nintendo's handheld hardware. Released in 1997, Turok Battle for the Dinosaurs, often simply just called Turok on the Game Boy, was not a port but actually a completely different game. It has a whole new story, has fantastic music. I love this Game Boy music. I die. Like, great. I paused for the music and I died. With the Game Boy's 8-bit hardware, Bit Managers created a side-scrolling action adventure mixed with shooting, platforming, exploration. It's got everything. It was so good. So nostalgic for this. I'm going to stop saying so. I know that's really bad, but you know. Now, if I was to sort of try and explain what this game is like, it's like a weird mix between Metroid and Contra. It's like a very light Metroidvania, but a very, very hard Contra game. It is unforgiving. You basically guide Turok across the detailed landscape. I think this landscape looks really good for a Game Boy game, and all the while you're collecting new weapons just to fight dinosaurs and weird cyborg enemies and mercenaries and whatever else the game throws at you. One of the things I find most impressive about this game, considering it's a 1997 Game Boy game, I think the animations in this are really solid for an 8-bit game as well. Look how smooth you climb up these ledges while being shot at and then die. Now, I really was hoping that I could get to a boss to show you how big the bosses are that they put into this game, but I have lost all ability and skill at this game, and I just kept dying, so you're just going to have to keep watching footage of me slowly get killed every couple of minutes. Hope you like looking at the same green scenery. Now, I did mention how much I really liked the music in this, and I'm going to absolutely butcher this name. The soundtrack was composed by Alberto Jose Gonzalez. That was on Wikipedia. I don't know if that's his name or someone just fucking around with Spanish names on the internet. But whoever composed this game really, really pushes the Game Boy to its absolute limit, like the sound chip. Just listen to some of this music. Like, them sound effects, everything going on here sounds so good for a Game Boy, an 8-bit Game Boy console. I think it's incredible, and I have a lot to say about the soundtracks of all of the Game Boy, the handheld games for Turok. I think they're fantastic. That's another word I need to stop saying is fantastic. Alright, I'll try. I'll do better. But while the Nintendo 64 soundtrack was dark, atmospheric, and also pushed the console to its soundboard limits, so did the Game Boy music, but leaning to more energetic and catchy rhythmic tunes that just you didn't get on Game Boys back then. I have to bear in mind that before the Pokemon games came out, there wasn't really a lot of very good music for Game Boy games. It was absolutely revolutionary. Together, both of the Turok games showed versatility of the franchise, one being a platformer side-scroller, one being one of the first ever 3D first-person shooters, and both of them completely defined the early stages of each of the consoles that they respectively came out on. This was a fantastic start to a franchise that went on to peak and then drop, but we will talk about that in time. But next I want to talk about probably everyone's favorite Turok game.
Now, the next game is probably the game that I spent the most amount of time on, and it was so cool. Like, this game came out, this was the first time, Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, this was the first time I ever saw a Nintendo 64 cartridge. I know this might be a bit weird because I've got them in plastic just because I love these so much, but this was the first time I saw a Nintendo 64 cartridge that was a different color than the standard gray, and already you just knew Seeds of Evil, it was black, it was evil. Evil game, hardest game ever when you were a kid as well. Let's get into Turok 2.
In 1998, Acclaim Entertainment and Iguana Studios once again released Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, a sequel that would push hardware to its absolute limit. Development of the Nintendo 64 version began shortly after the success of the first Turok game. They literally went from one game straight into making this one, and the team at Iguana aimed to make one of the most technically advanced shooters ever for a home console, and they basically did it. And to achieve this, developers pushed Nintendo 64 hardware to its maximum ability. New systems were built for large open levels, advanced AI for enemies, dynamic lighting, and a 16 megabyte RAM support for the expansion pack, which enabled much higher resolution and textures. And one of the weapons that I will get into in a little bit was one of the most iconic gaming weapons of the 90s. This game also brought multiplayer in the form of split screen couch co-op multiplayer. We will get into a multiplayer Turok game in a minute, but this was where it first kind of started. I think basically off the success of GoldenEye, they ham-fisted a multiplayer split screen onto this game, but had the idea to bring it out again for another one, which we will talk about a little bit later. The soundtrack also saw a return of Darren Mitchell, a man who could be completely made up, but Wikipedia says he's the composer, who brought a new sort of I don't want to say 90s aesthetic to the soundtrack, but it was very a lot of tribal percussion, atmospheric synth, ambient tension, similar to what we had in the first game, just more. It was just everything about this game is just a better version of the first game, in my opinion. I think Seeds of Evil, incredible. If I was to give you an idea, it's like he had his first attempt of composing a soundtrack with the first Turok game, and then knew what to do and came back with all the tricks of the trade to compose the second soundtrack. And it's just I love it. I love this soundtrack so much. Maybe I'm biased when I think about this soundtrack, but honestly I could listen to it all the time. Now, one of the things you may be noticing on the screen is there isn't any dinosaurs really. There is dinosaurs in this game. It's a Turok game, but the new enemy in this game are the Dinozoids, I think they're called, or Dinoids. I can never quite remember how you're supposed to say it. These are weird mutant alien dinosaur hybrids, and it makes the game way more intense. They are brutal and they are gory, and they've upped to the gore in this game as well. There you go, there's some dinosaurs. Just slice them all up for you. The violence is turned right up for this game. Again, I'd like to point out I am capturing this on the HD remaster, again through Nintendo Switch. And now how this game works is, instead of these open world levels where you have to collect keys, you have certain objectives that you have to complete in each mission. A lot of that results in, for example, in the first one, you have to rescue 4 children, which you saw me doing a second ago, and turn the power onto some distress beacons. Every mission has a certain amount of sort of things to do that you have to do. And yeah, it is very varied. The levels are fucking massive as well. This first level, the docks level, oh my god, does it go on. As a first level to the game, you will get very bored of the aesthetic of this first thing, because without playing the HD version where it gives you a little bit of a map like it gives you a hint as to where to go, highlights objectives for you while you're running around. The original Nintendo 64 one doesn't, and it takes a long time to get anything done. Just pre-warning you, if you like to play the original hardware, you don't like HD remasters, that's absolutely fine, but just know this game is very hard in the original version, because you just don't get given any indication what you need to do. You just have to listen and do it. But the gore's great in this game. Now, one of my favourite bits of this game is when you get to go onto the back of a Triceratops that's also a tank. Greatest idea ever. I love Triceratops tanks. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm a little bit disappointed in every other game that doesn't have this. I personally feel like a Triceratops tank should be in every game. Like, I really do. I think it adds so much to this level, just absolutely smashing through everything because you're on the back of a Triceratops. Outstanding work. And for later games, when people complained about dinosaur riding as a thing, I like to remind people that this dino riding happens in the second game. So yeah, they can shut up. Fantastic though, outstanding work by the developers, including this into the game, which is one of the greatest things about this game, is just the creativity and sort of the arsenal of weapons Turok has to basically go through this game and destroy stuff. Now, this is a probably terrible time to mention that the Turok that you play as in this game is not the Turok you play as in the first game. In the very first game, you play as a Turok named Tau Set. In this one, you are playing as Joshua Fireseed. Now, this is because Turok is a title, not a individual, should I say, which is a deviation of the comics, or like the original comics where Turok was his name. Now they've changed it for the story of this, being that Joshua Fireseed is this man here, and the title of Turok is like a warrior title. You inherit the title of Turok, gives you some powers, and you run out and get to use all of these really cool weapons. Now, this bit here, I'm just going to show off some of my weapons, well, some of the weapons in the Turok game, just so you can get an idea of how inventive some of this is. So this weapon, I don't know why I've not like cut it down, so it's just me using the weapon, but this is the fire cannon, or firestorm cannon, just a ridiculous minigun. Like quad barrel minigun, but also like the spinning animation for it is really fucking cool, especially back for when this game came out. It is gonna, oh, this is bad, I didn't realise I hadn't edited this very well. Just gonna be a lot of me running around caves looking for an enemy to kill, and then probably deciding to load back out into a different level. It's the problem when you go back through. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. Look at this professionalism in YouTube. Okay, I went back and edited out the thing. So yeah, this is the Firestorm Cannon. These are just some of my favourite weapons in this game. This is like a ball of coal. I can't remember what its actual name is, but it just blinds enemies. It is fantastic. It's like a flashbang. It just looks way cooler because I think it homes a little bit when you throw it, and it's just like, this is me looking for someone to kill. There we go. And just look at that. This is the cerebral bore. This is one of the coolest weapons of the 90s, one I talked about earlier. Basically, it burrows into people and then eats their brain, but for some reason didn't work on that particular creature. Now, this this weapon is my favourite weapon. I was a big fan of the Predator franchise growing up when I was younger, and I feel like that is like the Predator disc blade. Like, it's just that version, like Turok's version of it. I also love this hand like stabber blade. Let's see if it works again. No, it's just not doing anything to him. Nightmare. So you try and show off something cool, and it just, yeah, just doesn't let you do it. Annoying, yeah. But I think I just went for the wrist blade just to slice some people up, because it's just took his head clean off. That's fantastic work. The tech bow, iconic weapon of Turok, explosive like arrows that just go crazy. Yeah, tranquilizer. Don't know why I've got this in here. Who cares about a tranquilizer in a game where you get basically, this gun here is also pretty cool. It's like an electric stun weapon that you can just charge up. Always found that really fun to use. Pretty sure it does like a chain lightning effect as well and bounces between enemies, if there were enemies for me to find, because apparently when you've completed a game and you go back to capture footage for it, there's just nothing for you to do. Turok 2 will forever be one of the greatest Nintendo 64 games that has ever existed, and one of my personal favourite games of all time. But we're going to talk about the handheld version of this game as well right now.
Again, covering every single Turok game, we are going into Turok 2 on the Game Boy with this really, really cool black sort of cartridge it came in. I absolutely love this. Now, I have got a little bit of a story about this game. I really like soundtracks to games. Like, I listen to soundtracks all the time, and so for some reason, the this game, I have the soundtrack to like the first level of the game. I find really, really nostalgic to listen to. So I constantly listen to it all the time. I even like ripped it, like, you remember YouTube converter like to MP3. I ripped an MP3 recording just so I could have it and listen to it. A couple of years ago, when I was working a really shit call center job, just to like motivate myself to do anything, just had to listen to that Turok soundtrack on the way to work, just to get into any sort of mood to do stuff.
So, Turok 2 on the Game Boy Color, also released in 1998. This game is just a hard version, and for anyone that is wondering, the music that I used to listen to is this one that's playing right now. I'm just going to pause it very quickly. I don't know why I love this song so much, but I would listen to this all the time when I was working a really shit job, just to hype me up a little bit. Again, it is very similar to the first Game Boy game. It uses pretty much the same engine, and you're just going through side-scrolling. It's exactly the same sort of style of game, punishingly hard, mixed between sort of Contra and like a Metroidvania game. This game is incredibly hard. Like, I think these Game Boy games are some of the hardest games I've ever played. They're just brutal, and like everything hurts, everything damages you. There's like pinpoint accuracy from everyone. They just manage to get you all the time. Like, for the first sort of like 10 minutes of the game, you can't attack anyone until you get a certain power up, which you have to go find, and then you get to go to the Lost Lands or the Lost City or Lost Valley, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's called in this game. But the visuals in this game, they just look fantastic. I think they're probably some of the best Game Boy Color visuals I've ever seen. Like, I genuinely do think that. I think they look so nice. Now, the GBC, or the Game Boy Color soundtrack, was composed using the Game Boy's 8-bit sound chip. It doesn't actually tell me who was the composer, which I'd love to know, but it delivers this like shorter, punchier tracks, which I think sound really nice. It's sort of chiptune driven, with the weird aggressive bass lines that come with that, but also strangely melodic. I really think the music in this game captures the spirit of Turok, and just how Turok games should sound, and how they basically go on to sound exactly like this. I think it's a fantastic game. I need to stop talking about just how much I like it. Now, I can't really remember when I got given this game. I can't remember if I've said that already, but I just had this game. It's one of them games that just turn up. I don't know if I like begged my mum to buy it for me, or if I just had it. I don't know what I was looking at here. Oh yeah, I was trying to work out different controls to how to switch weapon. So basically, I've captured this on the original cartridge, but using the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance adapter on the GameCube to capture this. So I was just getting used to controls, really. That's about it. But yeah, I highly recommend this Turok game. It is one that not a lot of people have played because it was on the Game Boy Color. But I really think it's a fantastic game to add to the franchise. Very hard though, as you can see.
Now, the next game in the series is a bit of a weird one. Again, this is one that I kind of played at my cousin's house, and I didn't really own it until I was a lot older. But I did play it quite a bit with my cousins, and that is Turok Rage Wars. Now, this one is a bit strange. It is sort of kind of like the offshoot of Turok 2 in terms of like the sort of the storyline. There isn't much of a story to this one. This was one of these. So back in the sort of Nintendo 64 era, multiplayer was really kicking off because of GoldenEye. So a lot of companies just decided to make multiplayer only games. So this one's a bit more like a Quake sort of game or Unreal Engine where it is designed to be played with multiple friends, but you can play with bots. So we'll just get into this one real quick.
So by 1999, the Turok franchise had already made a name for itself with its first 2 games, and the third game was in development, and they sort of brought out an in between game. Technically, yeah, this is the third game, but it's just a multiplayer only game, despite this being the content of the first person game. Look at that stupid animation. But basically, what they wanted is, with the success of GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64, Iguana Entertainment wanted something that was fast paced and competitive, and the result was Turok Rage Wars. It's a multiplayer first person spin off built from the ground up by the series' most intense arena shooters. That was the idea. This was supposed to be a competitive arena shooter on the Nintendo 64, and just no one really played this at all. Now, development of the game began shortly after Turok 2. The team wanted to take the acclaimed multiplayer from Seeds of Evil and expand it. It says on the acclaimed multiplayer of Seeds of Evil, but the multiplayer was okay. And this was them trying to really capitalize on the multiplayer. It wasn't a true sequel in terms of the story. It wasn't really a port. It was just, it was nothing. And in my mind, it's the first game I remember being just a multiplayer only game, especially in an era before internet gaming. So this was a multiplayer only game for the 4 players that you could have on split screen. Like, this was just designed to end friendships. So now the game introduced much smaller, tighter levels, focusing on sort of mobility, even though it didn't really work out if you look how spongy some of these people are. They rebalanced a lot of the weapons and made them kind of shit for multiplayer. They added dozens of playable characters. It's just mainly skins though. Some of them have some stats from what I remember, and a lot of new multiplayer modes that hadn't been in the franchise previously, like frag tag, team battle, capture the flag, things like that. You can also put a shitload of bots into this game, which is really fun. Now, the single player version of this game is just the multiplayer, but with bots. This is what I'm playing at the moment, just to capture some footage. And there were some new additional weapons added to the game. For example, the torpedo launcher, which just fires homing missiles, the assault rifle, the scorpion launcher, which is a new sort of version of the missile launcher, and of course a new version of the cerebral bore to tunnel into people's brains. Now, interestingly, Rage Wars was one of the only games to flat out require the Nintendo 64 expansion pack. This meant that certain players just didn't get a chance to play this game because it just wasn't available. There wasn't really any story point to playing this game either. Like, you didn't find out anything about the additional lore of Turok, and the game was riddled with controversy at the time of release. Shortly after release, players discovered a bug affecting a 2-player trial mode, preventing some challenges from being completed. Acclaim responded with a rare move of the era where they issued a cartridge replacement program. Basically, you could take your cartridge back to wherever you bought it and they would replace it with a new copy. It's kind of like the old way of how you'd put out a patch, is just recall it and put it back out. Now, the soundtrack for this game is composed by Nelson Everhart, a staple of the Turok franchise from here on, composing some of the best music Turok has ever had to the system. For example, the intro, but I have a whole bit about him a bit later on in one of the other Turok games.
And of course, because I am obsessed with Turok and all of the games we are going to talk about, the companion game Turok Rage Wars, this one came out on the Game Boy Color and actually has a story, and you can play, like, it's actually got nothing to do with the Nintendo 64 game. It's its own thing.
So in 1999, Turok Rage Wars was also released on the Game Boy Color, and this was a very different to the Rage Wars that we got on the Nintendo 64. For example, this one actually had a story. While Iguana Entertainment developed the N64 version, the Game Boy Color adaptation was handed over to Bit Managers, the Spanish studio that had done the previous two games. Somewhat masters of the gaming thing at the time, and just kind of doing their own thing with Turok. They're just making their own storylines and whatnot, and that's pretty cool, having two diverging storylines of Turok. I think it's cool anyway. Now, rumor has it that when Iguana Entertainment came over to Bit Managers, they weren't asked to do a port, they weren't asked to they weren't given any of the N64 assets to downgrade, and they were just told one thing: make Rage Wars work on the Game Boy, and they absolutely did. This is one of the best handheld Turok games as well. It's so much more fluid than what we previously got. The combat is a little bit fairer, it's easier to play, it's very long for a Game Boy game as well. Again, it follows that sort of classic formula of side-scrolling Metrovania, but they added so much more to this game now with the new sort of directions that they could move in, and just additional colours, schemes, and fun stuff to add to the game. There's not really much more I can talk about with this game because I never actually completed it. It is still incredibly hard, even though they have vastly improved the combat and the health system in this Turok game. It's just very hard. He says that as he's just about to die as well. But yeah, this game's pretty good. Check it out, and it's the best version of Rage Wars we can actually get. If I could tell you the story, I would, but I don't actually know what it is, and I can't bother to look it up.
Now we're jumping to 2000, year 2000. This game was one of the greatest games, and probably the last Nintendo 64 game that I ever bought. And we are talking about Turok 3. This game, Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion, was one of the coolest games I ever played as a kid.
Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion, released in 2000, one of the last ever first-person shooters for Nintendo 64, and a fantastic game. The story for this game is superb. It starts off with Joshua Fireseed, who is your protagonist in the first game, being murdered by a bunch of people that are relevant to the story, but you know, I've not given too many spoiler stories, like story spoilers throughout this random review of the series, so I'm not going to mention who they are, what they're doing now, what's going on. But following Turok Rage Wars, the Turok team is ready to return to a full campaign, and the development was sort of quite intense for this game. It really pushed Nintendo 64 to its absolute limit. Now, what the footage you're seeing right now is captured from the HD remaster that came out a few years ago, which is the first time for years that we had a port of this game, because it was only on the Nintendo 64 until literally, I think, 2020. This port came out for the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, a few other things as well, so you can actually play this now. And there are some pretty big changes to the story of this game. For example, the graphics are already amazing, and for the first time ever in a Turok game, you got to decide who you play as. There is a multiple choice between playing as, I think her name is I can't even see what it says on the screen now. My screen's too. Danielle Fireseed, or her younger brother Joseph Fireseed. Both play slightly differently. Danielle's, she's got more weapons to her, more like firepower weapons, and Joseph's like the stealth option, who has a sniper rifle, night vision goggles, and can sneak into different things, because each of these levels can be played slightly differently. Now, the environments have changed as well. I feel like the development team really wanted to push what the Nintendo 64 was doing, because it was, at this time in the year 2000, aging hardware. The PS2 and the GameCube and the original Xbox were only a few years away. Rumours of them were circulating the gaming sort of like space, and this was really sort of like the last push. When you think about it as well, at the time the Nintendo 64 was still using cartridges in the year 2000, and yeah, it was sort of like a last hurrah. To overcome these challenges, the developers planned a game that would refine and not reinvent, a tighter, more dynamic, more cinematic successor to Turok 2, which they absolutely delivered on. As previously mentioned, for the first time in a series, the game chose between Joseph or Danielle Fireseed, siblings of the previous protagonist. Now, there is a much more basis on horror in this game and just general messed up, disturbing things, with the branching story paths of each character in each level, and 2 different gameplay styles. They could explore better themes of the game, such as horror, sci-fi, and just general violence. Different ways of doing violence as well in a video game, in a first-person shooter. But this was also done in a way to basically get more out of a game because of the hardware at the time. For example, like the branching missions, it use essentially the same map, but the character allows you to travel different places. So this basically gave you 2 games in one without dramatically increasing the size of the cartridge that they came on for the Nintendo 64. Turok 3 ran on an evolved version of the Seeds of Evil engine, rewritten to meet later sort of generation performance expectations. The improvements included real-time dynamic lighting effects, larger, more detailed character models, scripted in-engine cinematics, which I absolutely love, better enemy AI capable of coordinating attacks against you, and smarter use of cartridge space for geometry, audio, and cutscenes. The developers leaned heavily on the expansion pack peripheral that was sort of going around for the Nintendo 64 at the time, but I don't actually know if it was required to play the game, but it did offer a 64:48 high resolution support and much smoother frame rate if you play it with the expansion pack. So I assume you can play it without the expansion pack. I've just never have, and I can't be bothered to take it out of my N64 to try. Now, watching this gameplay footage, you may have noticed that you're not really in jungles anymore. So unlike the sprawling labyrinth-like levels of Turok 2 and the sort of the first game with the tightly paced story-driven environments, urban streets overtaken by mutants is a big thing. Military installation, alien dimensions, and eventually the shadowy Oblivion strongholds are big parts of this game. The goal was momentum, basically. Action sequences broken up by scripted moments that push the narrative forward. This was a shift that made Turok 3 feel more cinematic than its predecessor games, and I absolutely think that is such a great sort of aspect to this game. It really does tell a story through sort of visionary. It is very much a show don't tell story, whereas some games will just sort of like explain the story to you quite haphazardly, like exposition. This is very much visual. You see it happen in front of you and you understand it better as you go along. I don't know if that's everyone's cup of tea. I don't know if that even makes sense, but I love this game. The soundtrack to this game, I previously mentioned him in Rage War. The music for Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion was composed by Nelson Everhart, who, like I said, recorded the score for Rage War and contributed to some earlier Turok games, but I hadn't really spoken about him before. Unlike the atmospheric, moody soundscapes of the previous Turok games, these ones were more rhythmic, more cinematic, and more action-driven. Using the N64's limited audio memory, Everhart crafted some absolute amazing songs, again focusing on that tribal percussion, electronic beats, dark ambience, and sort of tension strings to really sort of build up like that crescendo sort of sound to put people on edge. He used some very clever compression techniques, allowing sort of longer, more complex tracks to fit within the cartridge without sacrificing fidelity. The soundtrack identity matched the game's focus, fast, urgent, and forward pressing. Now, I'd say one of the things that hindered the game a lot was just the release in 2000. Turok 3 arrived at the very end of the Nintendo 64's lifespan. The PlayStation 2 was about to launch, the GameCube was on the horizon, and gamers were shifting to newer hardware. Despite Turok 3 receiving praise for its improved storytelling, varied missions, and the technical polish that came with the game, standing as one of the final showcases of the Nintendo 64. However, a lot of people just didn't get a chance to play it because of when it was released. However, as I had previously mentioned in this video, I was always getting hand-me-down consoles, so I feel like that is the reason I played this game when I was younger, is because at the time I had the Nintendo 64, I was given the Nintendo 64, and that was it for me. So this was a game that came out for the Nintendo 64 that I could play. Like, I just died there, idiot. But yeah, so for me it was a new game. I was still on the old hardware, so I could grab it and play it. Though not as widely remembered as its predecessors, Turok 3 represents a crucial moment in the late N64 game development, a studio working at its absolute limits on aging hardware while settling to the groundwork for future generations, or setting the groundwork for setting the groundwork for future generations. It closed off the original trilogy of the Nintendo 64 games with a cinematic approach, with a bold two protagonist system, some of the best visuals and audio designs ever delivered or put onto the Nintendo 64. Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion remains a testament to creativity under constraint, the final chapter of the original Turok games by Iguana on sort of the Nintendo 64 consoles. In the shadow of the console's final days, a game emerged that blended a redefinement and ambition. Turok 3 wasn't just a sequel, it was a farewell to all of the Turok games that were like this, and I find it amazing. I love this game so much. This is one of them games that I would preach to people to play, and they just never got a chance. But they mainly didn't get a chance, like I said before, because it was only ever on the Nintendo 64 for a very long time, right up until 2022. So, for example, previously I had done, one of the very first videos that I had done on this channel was me talking about Turok 3. Just me playing the game, talking about the game. And I think that would have been 2022 maybe. And this game at the time then didn't have a port to the GameCube to the Nintendo Switch. It didn't have any ports at all, high definition ports to modern consoles. But since then it has come out, so I'm so happy that you can now play this game on modern consoles just for fun. I highly recommend it. You'd probably get it for about a tenner, and it's just fantastic. It's one of my favorite games ever. Weirdly enough, it reminds me a lot of Predator 2. I don't know if that's a good thing for people or a bad thing, but yeah, I love this game. I think it's incredible. Go play this game. Just go play it, please.
Where would we be without the Turok 3 Game Boy Color game? The thing you have to kind of bear in mind about the Turok games in general is that the Game Boy games and the handheld games are kind of the same continuity told in a separate way with more things added. That's how I like to imagine it, like it's two timelines.
When Turok Shadows of Oblivion was released on the N64 in the 2000, it marked the end of the franchise 64-bit era, but at the same time another Turok 3 was being developed, not for the powerful home console but instead for the Game Boy Color. And once again, while the game was being developed by Iguana Studios for the N64, the Game Boy Color version was being developed by Bit Manager, our favourite Spanish boys. Honestly, at this point they're hitting so many home runs with these Game Boy Color games. They're just so good. Now, the thing that I love the most about this game is that they weren't attempting to shrink an N64 game onto a Game Boy Color. They weren't working from the home consoles. The mission was just simple, and that was make your own game again. Just do whatever you want. And they did. Once again, building off the versions of Turok 1, 2 and Rage Wars, a hybrid of this Metrovania run and gun platforming exploration game was invented. Side-scrolling movement is back again. This time it's multi-directional platforming and vertical climbing sections. Heavy shooting. We start this game in a tank, which is a weird thing for Turok. Yeah, you get such a branching open world levels as well, with all of these weird sort of intricate mysteries and like puzzles to solve. Now, unfortunately, the Game Boy Color had some strict hardware limits, low resolution and small sprites sort of limited the memory of the game, but bit managers were known for pushing the hardware, as they had done with the previous 3 games that they had made, pretty much masters of the craft at this point. Now, I don't know if you can hear this music that's being played. Game Boy Color's sound hardware consisted of just a few audio channels for them to use, yet the composer crafted a soundtrack that blends driving chiptune percussion, oh god, I can't say percussion, urgent, action-oriented bass lines and atmospheric, high-pitched melodies and short, catchy loops. Some of these loops will actually drive you a little bit crazy while you're trying to do stuff, because this game is brutally hard. You will die a lot playing this game. Now this was also released in 2000 alongside the N64 game, and the Game Boy Color game was praised for its fast gameplay, solid animation, because the animation is fantastic in this, and strong weapon variety, as well as well-designed levels. While overshadowed by the home console release, it stood as a polished Game Boy Color game, well-crafted entry into the series and into the handheld consoles. It kind of caps off the original handheld consoles like storyline as well, so much similar to how the N64 version of this game finished off the sort of 64-bit era of Turok. This finished off the 8-bit era of Turok, and it is really good. Well, it's really fascinating. They're one of the final major action games in the Game Boy Color just before the Game Boy Advance came out. So similar as well to what was going on with the home consoles at the time, where it was this swan song to the system before the next generation came out. Exactly the same thing was happening with the Game Boy Color, because the Game Boy Advance was just around the corner, and this was one of the last Game Boy Advance game, or Game Boy Color games to come out before the Game Boy Advance, because I think, if I remember correctly, the Game Boy Advance came out in maybe 2001 or 2002. I think it came out in Japan before it came out in Europe. So yeah, it wasn't it was one of the last consoles ever, like games on the console ever. In the twilight of the Game Boy Color, bit managers produced one of the most standout action games, a title that has honoured the Turok legacy and the Turok games. I think it is a fantastic game, and I recommend anyone that is an enthusiast of the Game Boy Color to give this game a go. It is very fun, very fast paced, and incredibly hard, like all of the other games of the handheld Turok games. They are all incredibly hard games. Like, no joke, like they will frustrate you a lot trying to get through these games. The enemies just do not stop coming.
So after Turok 3, there was a little bit of a hiatus of Turok games, but then came a new console generation, and with the new console generation, we got one of the greatest shit games ever. Now, I say that it's hard for me to talk about this game because I love this game so much, but I cannot deny it is an unfinished and a very bad game. But we are talking about Turok Evolution. I've got 2 copies of this. For some reason, I have it on Classic on Xbox, probably because I have quite a big Xbox collection. So I think I just picked it up or had it in like a bundle. But I also have it on GameCube. I originally played it on the Xbox, but the GameCube version works just as well. Apparently the PlayStation 2 port isn't great, and the PC version is also not very good. But yeah, we'll get into this, and I'm going to talk a lot about this game.
So in 2002, after pushing the Nintendo 64 to its limits, acclaimed studio Austin set out to revive and reimagine their flagship franchise. The result was Turok Evolution, and it was a prequel designed to launch a series for the 6th generation of consoles, being the PlayStation 2, Xbox and GameCube, as I already said. And I just love this game. Look at that introduction. Now, one of the things that I've also got a lot of nostalgia for, which I wanted to talk about as well. Previously, I talked about how I love soundtracks to video games. and this is no exception. Just stuck on a loading screen here, but the title screen to this game is one of my favorite things to just listen to. I think the music and everything about this takes me back to 2002, and I'm just going to let it play for just a little bit for you to listen to. Honestly, that just takes me right back. I just love this title screen so much. So when developing this game, Acclaim wanted a fresh start. Rather than continuing the narrative of the N64 trilogy, the developers decided to reboot and reintroduce Turok to a universe and to a new fan base. Enter Tao Set. He was the protagonist in the very first game, and he kind of gets a new story. And for the first time, it kind of blends the origin of the original comic book character with the game thing of a time-traveling Native American person stuck in the Lost Lands or the Lost Valley. It varies depending on what game you're playing and what it's called. With the jump to more powerful consoles, the team built a completely new engine from scratch. This tech was aimed at creating the largest and most detailed Turok world yet. Key features to this included large outdoor maps with long draw distances, dense forests and jungles with physics-based foliage, flying sequences which were something, you'll see them in a minute, and real-time lighting and shadowing, and more complex AI than previous entries for the enemy AI, I should have said. The new engine allowed developers to push environmental immersion, something that couldn't really fully be achieved on the Nintendo 64 and probably wasn't achieved until the remasters came out all like 20 or so years later. However, with pushing all this new innovation, unfortunately the team did sort of fail in meeting them expectations, as the development of this game was so rushed to meet it, like shareholders' expectations or whatever it was at the time. They pushed this game out way too early and way underdeveloped. From what they originally promised to what was delivered is two separate things. The idea of Turok Evolution is way better than the reality of actually playing this game. Now, the gameplay to the Turok Evolution has been completely revolutionized. It emphasized a variety of ground combat. There are some aerial missions, lots of dinosaur interactions, and open-ended level exploration. The first-person shooter combat is refined for dual analog stick controls. The Predator riding missions is a new major feature which you'll see in a minute, and dynamic weapons like the Tech Bow, War Club, and chargeable energy weapons. There are so many cool weapons in this game which I will talk about because there is so much to love about this game, but it is a bad game. For example, when reading through the sort of specifications of this game, it highlights stealth as being one of the new features in a Turok game. The stealth in this game is awful. It's one of the worst bits in this entire game are the stealth sections. The idea behind this was to create a sort of game that felt cinematic and modern and told the story through visual telling like it did with Turok Shadows of Oblivion. However, the engine and the rushed sort of push out of this game just caused like huge chunks of the story to be missing. Lots of this game was cut back for a quicker, earlier release, and the story suffers hugely. The only reason I know what the story is because I've looked it up on Wikipedia separately. Now, as previously mentioned, it is a reboot and you do get to play as Tao Set. Well, I say reboot, it is a prequel game. So Tao Set was who you played as in the very first Turok game in the Lost Lands, and you learn how he is introduced. He has a protagonist, or like a arch villain, arch enemy called Captain Bruckner, who you saw in the opening cinematic, and the new dinoids or dinosaurs or whatever you want to call them, the hybrid creatures, the Slag, which is a stupid name for them. They clearly consulted no British people about naming that character. But this grounded sort of origin story aimed to give players easy entry into the Turok universe while expanding the lore in a new direction, and ideally just didn't really deliver on that because the game was so rushed. Acclaim invested heavily in creating and designing and world building the Lost Lands and rebuilt dinosaur species, ancient forests, industrial war zones and tribal villages, but they were all more or less cut or sort of edited to be background things that you barely see for brief seconds. The new flying sections were a cool addition, but there are a lot of these flying sections and a lot of people complained about them at the time. I quite like them. I think they're very fun because it reminds me of like Star Fox, but they can be punishingly hard. Now, I have already previously talked about how much I love that opening sequence to the game and the title screen, and a lot of that comes from the music of this game. It is another return to form for Nelson Everhart, this time with one of the best gaming soundtracks ever, and it was just hidden behind a bad game. I truly think that this soundtrack is one of the greatest soundtracks to a Turok game. It is larger and more theatrical than previous games. It's got a heavy emphasis on drums, high intensity, sort of like orchestral moments, and it is incredibly atmospheric. The music really does suit what you're doing in the game, which is a fantastic thing to play through. The audio team really leveraged new consoles and expanded memory, allowing for higher quality samples, longer loops in music and rich instrumentals that were not possible on previous generations of consoles. If anything that I can say about the rush development of this game, it is that the soundtrack does not suffer. Now, one of the things I do have to talk about in this game is the weapons. This game has some of the most creative weapons ever. For example, there's so many alt fires. You just seen this plasma pistol or plasma rifle go from homing to explosive to a electric pulse. You have a rocket launcher that just sounds amazing. I've already done a little video about this rocket launcher, but also contains the cerebral bore, the new cerebral bore, and is, again, fantastic. You'll get to hear a little bit of it in a minute, I think, when I eventually figure out where I'm going. But one of the best things to do in this game is just to chuck on a load of cheats. To play through this game without any cheats is psychotic. It is one of the hardest games to play because of how broken it can be with the AI. So I highly recommend just putting on all of the cheats and just playing through this game with invincibility and unlimited ammo and all weapons. It is way more fun like that. Like, that is my preferred way of playing this game now, is just to chuck them all on and just go through it. I love that missile launcher, that massive chunky nuclear like fire grenade comes out. This is the cerebral bore that I was talking about. Once it like fully loads up, you get to see how gruesome it is with the new edition, as it just like burrows in. I think I haven't mentioned yet, but the point of the cerebral bore is it homes in on the brain and explodes the brain. But now in this one, it takes off the arms and limbs for absolutely no reason. The Fletchling gun is awesome as well. It's a little underwater harpoon gun, but when you use its alternate fire, it will change into the coolest weapon around, which is this massive 3-barreled minigun. And I love the sound of this thing hitting people. It sounds amazing. The sound design again is something that was never sort of like spared any expense on. The grenades, a sticky grenade or a dark grenade, great addition. A quad shotgun where you can just pump loads in, like you can pre-pump 3 or 4 shots and then just explode a fucking million bullets out that blows people's limbs off and such. This sort of creativity in weapons is never seen anymore, and it is so upsetting. Look how many bullets just came flying out there. The tech bow, one of the coolest weapons in any game ever. Like this time you have loads of different sort of arrows to use. You get an explosive arrow, you get a poison arrow that makes enemies throw up. It is fantastic things to see. So I think this is just me trying to show you what it does, and missing. So that's just the normal arrow, and then we swap over to the explosive arrow, I think, in a minute. I don't know. There we go, explosive arrow. Incredible. And I think finally the sick arrow, the poison arrow, which is I couldn't find anyone to use it on, so I just had to sacrifice my ally as he's wandering about as well, just to show you what he does. Like, he's walking around being my friend, and I thought, why is he messing up this lift for me? It's actually quite annoying. This is what I'm talking about with how broken this game can be. Like, I can't work out what was going on here, why the lift wouldn't come down for me. But it would come down, but then wouldn't go back up. Like, little glitches in this game like that makes it more or less unplayable. But this is what happens when people get hit by the poison arrow. It is gruesome. They just start spewing everywhere. Completely unnecessary, but, you know, pretty cool. I truly just love this game. There is one more weapon that I'm going to talk about when it comes up, but for now you can just watch me try and figure out what the hell was going on with this lift, and like just failing to understand how basic physics in a game work. But for me, this game represents a special part of gaming. It is incredibly nostalgic for me to play this game, to talk about this game, and it should be a game that isn't very good. Well, it is, like, it's not a very good game. That is a fact. It is bad. It was not developed well, yet I have so much love for this game because I played it so much as a kid, and I just think it's a great, like, attempt of a game. Like, you can see there was passion put into this, but it was cut short by strict deadlines and like being rushed in development for no reason, because really, was anyone asking for it to be rushed out? Probably not, but they just went out. It would be a shareholder issue again. It just goes to prove that even in 2002, rushing a game out is never the option. Making cutbacks to what the original intention was is just never a good thing. This is the other weapon I was going to talk about. This weapon just makes you pick people up and you can just throw them around like it's almost like the grav gun. You throw them into your enemies, they just get mushed up when you do it, and its alternate fire is just this massive force push. Really cool. Really like this. Highly recommend this. Turok Evolution was more than just a sequel. It was an attempt to redefine a classic game series. A game built on new hardware, new ideas, and a new-ish hero, a new take on the hero, and a bold step forward for the franchise, for its dinosaurs, its chaos, and its imagination. However, it just didn't deliver. It had the ideas, but like I said, it just wasn't able to capture the spirit. The brokenness of this game ruins it for so many people, and I feel like you have to have that nostalgia to play the game. The only way you can get some good fun out of this game is by sticking on all of the cheats and just blasting through it as much as possible. But yeah, that's Turok Evolution for the main consoles. But next we're going to talk about something else.
Now, still talking about Turok, there was a companion handheld game to this Turok Evolution, and that is Turok Evolution on the Game Boy Advance. I really like this game. It is a bit more finished than the Evolution on the console, so we'll get into that.
So now that the console version had been released, the Game Boy Advance version needed a completely different approach, and that's what we got. Once more, a completely different version of the handheld thing. Developed by Rage Software, the GBA version wasn't simply a port, it was a ground-up reimagining of the Turok universe in handheld, much like the previous handhelds had been. Now, this game is so much like Metal Slug, it's unreal. You're about to watch some footage of me playing this game and me dying a lot because this game is brutally hard. So as I said, it was developed by Rage Software, a UK-based developer known for pushing handheld hardware. Their mission was basically to capture the feel of Turok, tell the same story in their own way, and to fit it into a portable 2D action platformer. They basically went with a run-and-gun shooter in the style of sort of Metal Slug, and this looks so much like Metal Slug, it's unreal. The Game Boy Advance was very powerful for its time, but nothing like the PS2, Xbox and GameCube, so they had a brand new challenge in developing this game, and they just went for a Metal Slug clone, which is fine. The 2D side-scrolling and the sprite-based textures look amazing in this game. Multi-layered pixel backgrounds, or parallax backgrounds, I think it says here, introducing platforming and climbing mechanics that weren't previously in the other games. Now, one of the biggest departures is obviously the art and visual style. It just looks so much brighter, saturated colours, and keeps characters visible. The high contrast dinosaur sprites look interesting, and detailed jungle, cave and fortress backgrounds look amazing. So I personally think the smooth animation is some of the best on the Game Boy Advance as well. It always reminds me of like the Wario games, Wario Land. Same sort of animation. I just think it looks really crisp and really nice. The story to the game is completely original. You get to pick between two characters, Turok and another guy, and it is a run and gun Metal Slug clone. It has big boss fights at the end of the level, massive environmental hazards, and an arsenal of weapons including pistols, plasma weapons. The tech bow makes a return, and lots of collectibles and power-ups. There is also the pterodactyl, the Pritosaur riding sections, but I just didn't get to that bit because this game's so fucking hard. Now, when this game was released, it just basically dropped off a little bit. A lot of people just went for the gaming, like the main console versions, and not a lot of people played the GBA version. But the Turok Evolution on GBA earned praise for its smooth, responsive controls, strong sprite work, and impressive action of a variety. Just the gameplay in this is pretty fun. It stood out as one of the better action shooters, but again, it just wasn't standing out enough to be one of the best games on the consoles, or one of the most popular games on the console. By console, I mean handheld. I should have said handheld, but on the GBA. So once more, Turok Evolution on the Game Boy Advance wasn't a port like any of the other handhelds. It was another reimagining, a handcrafted version of the Lost Lands, built on a smaller screen and faster gameplay, and for a new audience. Another reminder that even a tiny cartridge can bring a new rise to Turok. Except for I'm fucking bad at these games, aren't I? Jeez.
So after they had finished Turok Evolution, they sort of started the production of Turok Evolution 2. Now, this is one of them games that took like a long time to develop. There were some people backing it. They thought the first game was so rushed, what were they going to do? They were taking time on it. But at the time, what happened is the company that owned the Acclaim, I think it was, or the developers, was bought out by Disney Interactive, and then they decided to reboot, or give it a gritty reboot. And we're talking about 2008 Turok on the Xbox, and I think it came out on the PlayStation 3 and PC. Now, this game, when I saw this game, I thought this was incredible, but playing it now, well, we'll get into it.
Turok 2008 is really just such of the era of 2008 in gaming. It is once again another reboot of the Turok franchise, but this time a gritty cinematic first-person shooter built for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and PC. Basically, after Acclaim collapsed as a studio, a new studio took over from Disney. It was Touchstone Interactive, and rebuilt the series from the ground up. And this is this is it. This is Propaganda Games. This is, I think, the other studio behind this. To be more precise, basically what happened is Acclaim went bankrupt in 2004 after Turok Evolution, and the Turok license went dormant until Disney Interactive acquired it, and a brand new development team, Propaganda Games, based in Vancouver, was formed to make this game, bring Turok to a new generation. And yeah, they kind of did and kind of didn't. The game was developed by former EA, Ubisoft, and Radical Entertainment developers. A lot of like first-person shooter veterans from the Medal of Honor era and Call of Duty sort of games previous to 2008, and artists with a huge passion for science fiction and creature design. And that is one thing I will give this game credit for, is the dinosaurs look incredible, and I can't tell if it's like a rip-off or homage to like sci-fi when you see stuff like the Space Marines in this game, especially with how the start of the game and they all get out the cryopods that look near lawsuit level close to aliens. So now this new reimagining of the Turok universe, instead of the sort of Native American comic book series that we previously sort of had, it's now Joseph Turok, a mysterious, hard-headed ex-Black Ops soldier with a troubled past and gruff tones. The story was relocated from the mythical Lost Land, or Lost Lands, or Lost Valley, to a genetically engineered bioplanet full of randomly dinosaurs, because in space, why not make dinosaurs? But you won't only find dinosaurs here. There are mutated insect, rogue soldiers that Turok's been sent to hunt down, and the new direction allowed the team to blend sort of like survival horror, military sci-fi, and intense creature encounters. Now, one of the things that they try to incorporate into this game is dynamic creature AI, and the dinosaurs behave unpredictably, and that is kind of a fault of the game, as well as well, they're definitely unpredictable, I'll tell you that. They attack soldiers, they attack each other, and they attack pretty much anything that they can, and they are the most chaotic little shits ever. Stealth is back in a big way this time, with close quarter combat knife kills, redesigned cinematic takedowns inspired by action films like this. Look how cool that looks. It's not that cool. This game suffers from one of the worst and most unplayable things I've ever seen in a game. That used to happen a lot in 2008. Is basically instead of recoil being the crosshair moves as a recoil, they just shake the screen, and it has that awful thing that as your health indicator is just how red the screen is. Yeah, it's a nightmare. Trying to aim on this game is an absolute nightmare, because you kind of stay where you're shooting, but the screen just jumbles about. You can't see anything, and the slightest hit, blurry vision. It is a nightmare, honestly. Later on in the game, you get a bow just to really hammer in that Native American vibe that they're going for, space Native Americans, and it's overly accurate. Like, I don't know if that's a thing I can explain, if that makes any sense to people, but yeah, it's like a bit too accurate. You're off by a millimeter, you'll miss by a millimeter. It's a nightmare. And I also find that, like, in general, the point of view of this game is a little bit tight. It's a little bit too zoomed in. Like, I've not changed the zoom on this footage you're seeing. It's just always that zoomed in. Now, the one thing I will go back to saying I like about this game a lot is how it looks. I like how the dinosaurs look. This is the best looking dinosaurs we've had in any Turok game. They look amazing, they react amazingly, and the T-Rex also looks incredible. You're hunted by a T-Rex in this, because this game tried to basically rip off Dino Crisis. All of the dinosaurs feel quite unique. The raptors were designed to be sort of lightning fast, aggressive pack hunters, and they will absolutely blindside you, while the T-Rex is this massive, screen-shaking apex predator that just dominates every scene that it's in. The jungle environments use highly dense foliage, volumetric lighting and particle effects to immerse yourself in this alien world, and I think it does a good job for a 2008 game. There you go, there's the T-Rex. He's pretty cool. I don't like it when T-Rexes don't sound like the Jurassic Park T-Rex, but that's just the thing. Now, the soundtrack to this game, it was composed by Einon Zur. I don't really know much about them. I don't know if I pronounced that name right, but that's what it said on the Wikipedia. They are known for other games such as like Fallout, Prince of Persia, and later some of the Dragon Age tracks. And the soundtrack does sound completely different. I could not tell you a single song from this game, but it's that generic orchestral sort of jungle theme. I don't know how to describe it. It's not really that memorable compared to the other ones, in my opinion. Now, when this game launched in 2008, critics praised it for the dinosaur encounters, the bow combat for some reason, the jungle design, and the music. Again, I don't really know why they'd praise the music, but many people criticised the inconsistent squad AI, the uneven pacing of the story, and the ridiculous difficulty spikes in this game. And I think one of the big things about this game, the reason why this game is so hard, is because the controls are not friendly at all. It is very hard to get used to how this game plays. I don't know whether that's just because it came out in 2008 and this is how games were played back then, or if it's just, I don't know how to explain why it's so hard, but it just is. Even playing it on the easiest difficulty, it is still a bit of a struggle. And when I say the easiest difficulty, you literally get the choices between playing on normal, hard, or very hard. Like, that's pointless difficulty scaling. I can only really play this game for a certain amount of time, just because it genuinely, that zoom that I was talking about, it really messes with my head. And the same with the camera shake of the camera shaking every time you touch a game. You also get knocked over a lot by velociraptors or dinosaurs. That seems to be the big thing that they do. Instead of actually attacking you, they just knock you over. When you get trapped into them animations where you have to like kill them with your knife, or close combat, like a quick time animation, you can still take damage from everything else that's attacking around you, but you can't do anything to stop them from being like from attacking them, if that makes any sense. Basically, you can still take damage in a quick time animation that you can do nothing to stop, and you will be in so many of them animations. They are constant. You get knocked over all the time. Them things jump on you a lot of the time. Like, the animals just come out of nowhere just to hit you. So do the other enemy, like the enemy soldiers, which have a distinct lack of blood, which is a little bit boring. Like, I wish it was a more gory game. It just isn't that gory at all. And your AI squad mates can be a bit of a nightmare. Weirdly enough, that's Ron Perlman that voices Slade, which I think is a very interesting thing. There you go. There's me being knocked over. I'll get used to that. I think it happens again in a minute. Nope, I killed it. All right. But yeah, Turok 2008 was one of them games just sort of like failed to do anything with. Now, there was a planned sequel for this, but it just it never took off after this game, because this game really did fail to meet expectations. They were hoping that it would give a brand new reboot to the series, and they would have a Turok 2 and a Turok 3, but it just never ever took off. Wasn't that good, wasn't that memorable, and it came out in a time where the Xbox 360 was being dominated by games like Halo 3 and whatever was on the PlayStation 3 at the time. I can't remember what was on the PlayStation 3 in 2008. So unfortunately, for a very long time, this was going to be the last entry in the Turok franchise that we saw for ages, and it's a bit of a terrible send-off for one of the most originally legendary game series that there ever was.
There isn't actually a handheld for Turok 2008, and what happened with the game and the cancellation of the sequel, that's a whole other thing. But there is one more game that we need to talk about. This game, Turok Escape from the Lost Valley.
So this game is a complete departure to all other Turok games. For decades, the Turok franchise meant dinosaurs, survival, and action, but in 2019, a series took an unexpected new turn, with a smaller, more cutesy, and intimate than ever before. This is Turok Escape from the Lost Valley, a isometric survival game, I think. I don't even know what type of game it is. Puzzle game, I guess. I don't really know who this was made for, but this is incredibly faithful to the Turok comics. So in 2019, Universal and Microsoft launched Dream Build Play program, encouraging indie developers to reinterpret classic properties. Now, one of this reinterpretations by Hit Grab Games was a small sort of Canadian-based team, was an isometric social RPG mouse hunt game for Turok. Their pitch wasn't this gritty first-person shooter or a sci-fi epic. Instead, it was something charming, colourful, and handcrafted. A top-down adventure inspired by the original Turok comics from the 1940s. Unlike the Nintendo 64 shooter or the 2008 reboot, Hit Grab looked backwards and started the series from basically exactly where the 1950s comics left off. You play as Turok or Andor as they first appeared in this cutesy art style. They really wanted to capture the brotherly bond between Turok and Andor, and sort of the mystery of the Lost Valley, as well as the beautiful but deadly prehistoric world that they live in, all while contrasted against this sort of fantastical art style. Now, as you can see from the footage being played, the art direction was one of the most striking departures from the franchise history. Hit Grab chose a style they called Dioram Fantasy. Don't really know how to say that, but yeah, they chose that style that they made up. Soft, rounded character design, storybook-like environments, hand-printed textures, and miniature terrain with clear, readable details was their motif. This made the Lost Valley feel like a tabletop model, beautiful to look at, but lurking full of threats. Dinosaurs, despite their cute proportions, were designed to be intimidating and unpredictable, which they still are in these games. Now, the gameplay does center around isometric action adventure, blending puzzle solving with survival. To escape the valley, the players must hunt and craft supplies, build and upgrade weapons, and solve environmental puzzles, as well as fight or evade dinosaurs and keep Andor alive, or Andor, I keep calling him Andor. There's also a whole bunch of tribal encounters that you have to get through, where you just meet sort of these, I guess they're cavemen, who try and attack you. Now, one of the most heartbreaking things about this game is originally it was released on Steam in 2009 and I think maybe the Epic Store, but since then, due to a trademark dispute, it has been delisted and is quite hard to find. But if you want to play this game, I will post a link in my description to where I downloaded this game. Basically, a guy on Reddit from 6 years ago was really into this game and has kept the original file. So yeah, I'll post that link if you're interested in it. It's quite fun. It's different. I would recommend it. It is a new take on the Turok franchise, and if you like the other games, I would say this is a pretty fun interpretation of Turok. It's definitely not where I would start for the franchise, but it is a good sort of fun game by itself. It is a nice homage to the original comics.
So that has pretty much covered all of the Turok games, and I've talked a little bit about the lore of Turok, how it was made, development, each game, my thoughts on each game, how much I just fucking love this series. And then they announced Turok, a new reboot of the Turok games, coming out next year, I think it is. At the time of the recording, it's 2025. I think the recording's coming out in 2026, well, the Turok game is coming out in 2026. It's coming out on the PlayStation 5 and the newer Xbox consoles. I am very optimistic about this game. A lot of people saw that trailer and said, it doesn't really look like Turok. And I'm like, it does look like Turok if you've played all the other games and know that Turok is a weird mix of sci-fi, dinosaurs, and Native American time traveling.
If you just take a couple of seconds to actually look at this game, I'm just going to talk over the trailer so you can see it. Already we've got that alien world, and you can tell from the design of these characters that it is that Turok blend of sci-fi from the original few games. Sci-fi, dinosaurs. I think this looks so good. This looks fantastic. I don't care what anyone says. This is pure Turok as it is. I've just spent ages talking about how much I love these games. and I am so excited for this. I think it looks fantastic. I think it's that weird blend of everything you need, and it's moving to a third person's perspective, which I think is going to be great. It is going to be great. You'll see some gameplay in a second, and I just think all of this looks fast, it looks great, and it's Saber Interactive, the people that did the Space Marine games. Bring it on.
Bye. It's awesome. Anyway, that's been me talking about all of the Turok series, a series that I am so passionate about. I fucking love this series. I hope other people like this series as much as I do, because I'd love to see the games do well. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, and leave a comment below. What is your favorite Turok game, or what do you hate the most about a Turok game? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely would love to know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching.